everyone, it's Maki here. Lay Name is a character who appears in Hathaway's Flash. In the film, in particular, he plays a role that makes him seem like a very important character. I imagine many viewers came away thinking he was a key figure and a rival to Hathaway Noah. In the novel, however, he never had much screen time. Although he was portrayed as a highly skilled pilot capable of operating the Penelope, compared to Candice Rec and Gigi, he inevitably felt more like a supporting character. In the film, however, he is portrayed as almost one of the main characters. Based on information released through Japanese media, this time I would like to analyze how Lane will play an active role in the third film. Please be aware! Today's discussion contains spoilers for the second film. If you want to enjoy the story without knowing anything in advance, please watch this program after seeing the film. If you would like to support my channel, please consider joining the membership for just 99 cents per month. As a thank you, you will receive a name badge and exclusive comment stamps. Now then, let's begin our discussion. The three individuals who discussed this information in the media are the same people I introduced in the previous program. Firstly, Mr. Naohiro Ogata, who oversees the business strategy for the Gundam series as a whole. Mr. Keisuke Sakai, who is a producer on Hathaway's Flash. The interviewer was Mr. Shinichiro Inoue. Mr. Inoue supported Mr. Yoshiyuki Tomino during the creation of the original Hathaway's Flash novel. He came up with the name Gundam and recommended designer Yasuhiro Moriki. Mr. Moriki is a designer who has worked on many different robot anime series. He also designed the popular robot Z-Rhymer, which appeared in Japanese video games. Originally a robot that appeared in manga and anime, it gained immense popularity after making a guest appearance in video games. Fans often comment that the design in the novel resembles Z-Rhymer. This is only natural. Gundam and Z-Rhymer are like siblings, both created by the same designer. The three individuals, all of whom played important roles in the production of Hathaway's Flash, discuss Lay Name. Let's explore the conversation and search for clues about how he may feature in the story. Mr. Ogata once again discussed Lane's role in the original novel. In the second volume of the novel, which served as the source material for the second film, Lane does not appear much. However, the filmmakers wanted to create some memorable moments for Lane to make the trilogy more exciting. Mr. Inoue commented Lane is the kind of character who would have been the protagonist in a traditional Gundam series, isn't he? Mr. Ogata then shared director Shuko Murase's thoughts on the matter. Mr. Murase's approach was to create a story in which Lane would fill the role of a traditional Gundam series protagonist. Mr. Sakai also spoke about how the director approached Lane's characterization. In the first film, Lane was portrayed as an overconfident individual. The animators were asked to emphasize this through his facial expressions, and the voice actor was directed to reflect the same overconfidence in his tone of voice and manner of speaking. Then, at the climax of the story, Lane suffers defeat. Although he comes close to losing his confidence, Lane rises again through his rebellious spirit. In the second film, he even exclaims at this rate, "I'm going to lose." Yet he still refuses to run away and continues to fight. This kind of portrayal stems from the director's desire to present Lane as a character with protagonist-like qualities. These are all the comments that were made regarding Lay Name. A particularly important moment occurs when Lane exclaims at this rate, "I'm going to lose." He delivers this line during his battle against the Gundam while piloting the Ulysses. Although it may seem like a casual remark, it is actually a pivotal scene that illustrates Lane's growth. At the end of the first film, he is defeated. After taking a direct missile hit, he loses consciousness. When he finally wakes up, the Penelope has already been disabled. However, he cannot accept this and becomes confused. He says something like, "That can't be right. I must have shot down the enemy too." He personally witnessed the Gundam firing missiles at him. The Gundam he saw was an enemy machine that appeared completely undamaged and fully operational. His assertion that he must have shot down the enemy directly contradicts what he witnessed. Of course, this could be attributed to temporary confusion caused by the shock of the impact. However, given Mr. Sakai's comment that Lane was portrayed as an overconfident person, it is also possible to interpret Lane's words here as wishful thinking, arising from his refusal to accept defeat. In the second film, Lane calmly acknowledges the possibility of losing. This comes from acknowledging his opponent's abilities and objectively analyzing the difference in their skills. Even after reaching that conclusion, he continues to fight in the Ulysses, a machine inferior to the Penelope in terms of performance. Ultimately, he is defeated. However, it is not a one-sided or effortless defeat. There are moments when he successfully evades attacks from the Gundam. Furthermore, the Gundam uses funnel missiles in some scenes. One of Mafty's mechanics had warned Hathaway not to use the funnel missiles, as they would require the remaining ammunition for the final operation. Yet Hathaway chose to use funnel missiles against Lane. It is also true, of course, that Hathaway was confused during this battle. He mistook his opponent for Hathaway and the new Gundam, and this confusion contributed to his decision to use the funnel missiles. Ultimately, how this should be interpreted is up to each viewer. Personally, however, I felt that Lane's growth was clearly depicted during this climactic battle. I'd love to hear your thoughts as well. Another thing that stood out to me was how friendly Lane was with the members of his unit. In the first film, there were scenes that almost made it seem as though his comrades looked down on him. For example, there was a scene in which they teasingly called him Captain Lane. In the second film, however, their conversations feel much friendlier and more genuine. It's just my interpretation, but I wonder if this change was influenced by the fact that his comrades had the opportunity to review the battle records from Lane's fight against the Gundam. At the climax of the second film, Kenneth himself describes his subordinates as elite soldiers. Even though Lane lost, they witnessed him demonstrate genuine skill in combat. Perhaps that experience led them to truly accept Lane as one of their own. Maybe Lane himself had matured emotionally as well. This growth may have allowed him to let go of past mockery and build a friendlier relationship with those around him. So, what kind of mobile suit will Lane be piloting in the third film? I think the key clue lies in Mr. Ogata's statement that the director is portraying Lane in a role similar to those of the protagonists in traditional Gundam series. Another important comment has also been made. It relates to the topic I discussed in the previous program. Will the Gundam receive an upgrade? Mafty is not a regular military force, but a terrorist organization. They have also lost their mothership, the Valiant. As a result, obtaining supplies is extremely difficult. Mr. Ogata explained that while there is naturally a desire for a Gundam protagonist to appear in the final battle with an upgraded machine, Hathaway's circumstances make this difficult. Combining these two comments leads me to predict that the Penelope will return with new equipment or in an upgraded form. I believe the story itself contains hints that support this possibility. One such hint comes from a statement made by a mechanic of the Earth's Federation forces to Lane. He says all of the exterior components will need to be replaced, but it will be ready in time for the final operation. How should we interpret the statement that all of the exterior components will be replaced? One reasonable interpretation is that the damaged armor will simply be replaced with new parts. However, the Earth's Federation forces have abundant funding and plentiful resources, which is a major difference between them and Maki. Furthermore, the mission to defend the Adelaide Conference is an operation to protect high-ranking officials at the heart of the Earth's Federation government. On top of that, Canis has continued to achieve success after success in the fight against Maki. The conditions necessary to secure substantial support are already in place. There is a model suit from an earlier story that found itself in a very similar situation to that of the Penelope. That machine is the Gundam GP-01. It is the Gundam that stars in the 0083 story. During the course of the story, the GP-01 is heavily damaged. As a result, it undergoes reconstruction work at a lunar facility. This ultimately leads to its rebirth as the GP-01 full burner. The GP-01 was originally planned to be converted into a space use configuration. This involved relatively minor modifications, such as replacing the propulsion system with space equipment and adding propellant storage units to the legs. However, due to the extent of the damage suffered by the machine, the plans were changed. One of these changes was the decision to replace all of the exterior components. New space-use propulsion systems were installed throughout the machine to increase its performance and transform it into the full burner. Furthermore, the full burner incorporated technology from the GP-02. The movable thrusters mounted on its back were designed using the same concepts and technology as the shoulder-mounted thrusters of the GP-02. The Penelope was developed as a mobile suit, equipped with a Minovsky flight system. The She-Gundam, meanwhile, was designed later on as an evolution of the technology pioneered by the Penelope. In this respect, the Penelope is similar to the GP-01 and the She-Gundam is similar to the GP-02. Another interesting similarity exists between the GP-02 and the She-Gundam. Both were acquired by organizations hostile to the Earth's Federation forces. The Deer's fleet and Maki both acquired their Gundams through the actions of insiders. Given these parallels, I suspect that the Penelope may be modified to incorporate technology derived from the She-Gundam. What do you think? I'd love to hear your predictions too. That concludes today's program. Thank you very much for watching all the way to the end. I look forward to seeing you again in the next episode.